This is TWiT.
But honestly, what haven't they destroyed? Look at the messaging mess. And then now Hiroshi Lockheimer has a temerity.
We still have Gmail.
We still have Gmail.
We still have Gmail.
We still have Gmail.
Yeah. That and search.
And search still works. But
there
boy,
have been reports that
YouTube,
search isn't all that good anymore either.
I just saw that. Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that.
But back to the messaging thing. That was Ron
Amadio in the Ars Technica,
wrote it's one of those things where it's like, why didn't I write that?
It was a
so
great
good.
piece. Yeah.
So good. But he basically points out, first he lays out the case about how Google is complaining that iMessage is too powerful, that they use bullying. Google accused Apple of bullying by making people who use Android devices green instead of blue.
How dare they? Well, this is taking off on the Wall Street Journal article, which because there was nothing else to write about, the Journal suddenly discovered that people who are using Android Messenger feel left out of Apple Messages conversations.
but after laying out the case that Google is making against Apple, Ron just eviscerates them by pointing out that since Apple launched iMessage in 2011, same year they launched Google Plus, by the way. Google launched Google Plus. Google has launched 13 messaging products.
I think we've used them all.
Jeez.
The only person I ever talked on Allo with was you, Jeff Jarvis.
Yeah, I know. And you're the only person I ever talked to.
Remember
somewhere out in the cloud is our conversation.
Allo.
It says, oh, this is dumb. Yeah, I think it's pretty dumb.
Ron's headline, after ruining Android messaging, Google says iMessage is too powerful. Please stop kicking our butts so badly. Google failed to compete with iMessage for years, and now it wants Apple to play nice. How many? 13, Mike? Wow.
13 that they've launched in total. They've killed a bunch of them, obviously, because it's Google. But now, even today, they have 8, and they're even incompatible with each other.
Jeez.
So today they have 8 messaging solutions. But imagine, theater of the mind, imagine, if you will, ladies and gentlemen, if after seeing Apple launch iMessage in 2011, Google launched Google Messages in 2012, and said, this is the only messaging platform we will ever support. It's on cross-platform on everything. It supports all the bells and whistles. You can make phone calls. You can do this. You can do that. You can have it on an iPhone. You can have it on an Android phone. They would completely dominate this space if they had done that, right? Because iMessage has always been primarily for Apple users.
Yes.
Right.
They could have made it cross-platform.
They could have had the WhatsApp.
Yeah,
it would have been like WhatsApp.
Yeah,
but no, they are so disorganized and visionless that they just couldn't do that. So
Ron also points out, because we've talked about this, that Google's saying, well, everybody should just use RCS. If Apple would only add RCS to iMessages, we'd be happy. Right. He says even if Google could magically roll out RCS, rich communication messaging standard. Rich communication standard. It's a poor standard to build a messaging platform on because it's dependent on a carrier phone bill.
Right.
It's anti-internet. It can't natively work on web pages, PCs, smartwatches, and tablets because those things don't have SIM cards. They don't have phone numbers. The carriers designed RCS, so RCS puts your carrier bill at the center of your online identity, even when free identification methods like email exist and work on more devices. Google is just promoting carrier lock-in as a solution to Apple lock-in. And unfortunately, I have to agree with him on that.
Yeah, but the solution, as I intimated a minute ago, is for them to have an alternative that isn't lock-in.
Right.
To have something like WhatsApp, but from Google.
They could have put it everywhere. This is what they did with Chrome. Chrome has been hugely successful.
Yes.
Just make it free, make it available. Google benefits because people use it.
And just have one.
See earlier discussion of WordPress.
Just have one. Yeah. Google is only Google. Hangouts would have worked. They were
right. Well, Ron Amadio points out that Hangouts is the best messaging solution that Google ever came out with,
and they killed it.
Yeah, it was solid. Wasn't perfect, but it was definitely.
The reason Messages works. One of the reasons Messages works, besides the fact that it's the default messaging app on every iPhone sold, and you can't turn it off. The other reason is it degrades properly. So it uses the internet for data like WhatsApp, but it will also use SMS. And so you can have some assurance that you can iMessage everybody.
Yeah.
And then it has desktop. It works. It's a very Apple-y thing because you can't use it anywhere else.
And it's actually very secure.
And it's secure. Apple knows what you're doing, but other than that, it's secure.
Well, I don't think even Apple. Well, I mean, theoretically they could find out what you're doing, but it's like it's heavily encrypted, so no third party is gonna.
It's a hell of a lot better than most stuff.
Yeah.
And Google, I used Hangouts for a long time because it worked on my iPhone, it worked on my Android phone, it worked on my desktop. Android messages will kind of do all of that. I have it on all those places, but it's not as good as Hangouts.
Yeah, Hangouts was definitely the solution for our family.
Yeah,
because we could use it everywhere.
So no, you can't bitch Google.
What was their rationale for screwing it up? Can you imagine what went through their heads?
Ron wrote a long, or somebody did. Ours had a 25,000 word history. Yeah, it was Ron. History of Google's messaging.
And I did that once too. I wrote something like that for Computer World, and by the time it was published, it already was out of date because they changed yet another thing. So I'm not even to touch it anymore.
So it's fun if you go through all the different apps: Google Talk, Google Voice, Google Wave, Google Buzz, Slides Disco. The Google Plus, I don't know what that is. I don't know. It's in the article. The Google Plus era, Google Plus Hangouts video chat, the first Hangouts, Google Plus Huddle Messenger. Huddle?
Oh, God. Do we remember that?
Yeah, now it's a Microsoft.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember Huddle. Google Docs Editor Chat, Google Hangouts, Google Spaces, Google Allo 2016, Google's dead on arrival WhatsApp clone. Google Duo, which I still use with my daughter for video calls. Google Hangouts, Meet. They renamed it Meet. YouTube Messages, Google Hangouts Chat. They renamed it Chat. Google Maps Messages. YouTube Messages? Oh, wow.
Yeah, in 2017. He actually says, yes, this really was a thing. Yeah. Google and RCS, Google Photos Messages, Google Stadia Messages, Google Pay Messages, Google Assistant Messages, Google Phone Messaging, Google Chat Part 2. And then the last bit, is anyone in charge at Google?
And the answer is no. And to answer your question, the elevator pitch or the short version of the answer is that just like Microsoft used to do under Ballmer, each division has its own messaging app, and they don't talk to each other, and they're competing with each other. And there's nobody in charge. There's no Steve Jobs. There's no Satya Nadella even to say, no, this is the one we're doing. That's it, period. Everybody, we're putting all the wood behind this particular arrow. Nobody ever did that. I've been maintaining for several years that Sundar Pichai is a horrible CEO. Nobody ever says that. But look at the result of what's happened since he took over. It's all this stuff, the closures, the failures, this kind of thing. This is all getting worse and worse under Sundar Pichai's leadership.
Remember that great cartoon?
I agree with you.
It was making fun of Microsoft where all the divisions are shooting at each other.
Yes.
I have the original on my wall at home, actually. The artist sent it to me. Apparently, Google decided that was a good way to do business, and they adopted the Microsoft method. Meanwhile, Microsoft had the good sense to stop doing that and to kind of at least try to unify themselves. It's sad.
For a long time, this spaghetti, throw it against the wall and see what sticks approach was great for Google. They got some major hits. Gmail was a 20% project by one engineer initially. The idea of having advertising was just some engineer had to talk Larry and Sergey into doing ads, and they were against it, and they're like, no, we should do ads. And so for a long time, most of the things that were best about Google were the result of this kind of like every engineer kind of like spinning up their own thing, and then we'll try it and see what happens. But Google grew so big and they became so successful that they could no longer be that kind of a startup-like company. And so now you have people betting their businesses on their infrastructure. You have all kinds of, billions of people using their products. And so you can't have that sort of scrappy startup, let's try it and see if it works kind of mentality. You have to have a vision about what you're going to do, and then you have to execute on that vision. And they just can't seem to do it.
This is
Google
Manu
needs
Cornet's
ADD treatment.
This is Manu Cornet's organizational trees for all the different companies. Here's Microsoft, where they're all shooting at each other. Actually, Google's is still, I think, fairly accurate. Although this,
you know what, that looks like their new building.
Yeah. Everybody reports to everybody else. Amazon's very hierarchical, and I think it still is.
That looks like Amazon's atrium.
It is. It's the downtown Seattle atrium. Facebook looks like a giant beanbag. Everybody's connected. Apple, this is from the era of Steve Jobs' era, centralized point, although I think it's probably still the same. Mm-hmm. And then Oracle is like a giant legal division, a little engineering division. Manu, you got it. You still, and I'm very proud to have this on my wall. By the way, Satya Nadella, I didn't realize this, in his book, Hit Refresh, in the first page, mentions this cartoon and says this was the thing I was trying to solve. So Google apparently did not get that message.